Well, we all talked about the vibes going into Thursday's game being definitely of the Adams division between the Hartford Whalers and the Quebec Nordiques. And the game on Thursday between the Hurricanes and Avalanche did not disappoint. 8 goals, 13 penalties. This thing goes to a shootout, and anything that could happen did happen. So let's talk about this crazy game that happened on Thursday night in Colorado on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the everydayers for making this your first listen of the day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes, or in this instance, Hartford Whalers. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hawkers, also the co-host of the Search Cast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. On the Friday edition of the show, basically we're reacting to everything that happened on Thursday between the goals, the penalties, players dropping like flies. This thing ends in a shootout, and anything that's in between that as well. Talk about players that are getting hurt. We're going to be looking at the Carolina Hurricanes roster as it is now even more depleted coming into the game. And basically after the game, they went into the game with. And then we're also going to be talking about and listening and reacting to Seth Jarvis in his post-game press conference. But before we jump into all that, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, like I said, this game pretty much had everything going for it. You had 13 penalties. You had this game seeing the Colorado Avalanche outshoot the Hurricanes, which you don't really see the Hurricanes do very much. A bunch of guys leaving the game early. Like I said, this thing ends in a shootout. It was an absolute barn burner. It definitely felt like 1980s, 1990s hockey, where for some reason it's just everything was going in the net. Anything that could happen did happen. Now, shots-wise, Avalanche did outshoot the Hurricanes 48-31. The only period the Hurricanes actually led in shots on goal was the third, 12-11, but 16-5 in the second for the Avalanche, 18-12 in the first as well. Like, it was pretty lopsided in terms of the shots for the most part. Like, so you never really see the Hurricanes have 5 shots in a period, but that's what it came down to. And in the end, even the Avalanche, one more faceoffs compared to the Hurricanes, 40 out of 73 for 54.8%. Unfortunately, the very struggling Avalanche power play did get 1 on 8 attempts, and the Hurricanes went 0 for 5. But this game was absolutely chaotic right from the jump. There was one point where I think it was penalties were like 7-2 in favor of the Avalanche. Like, basically anything that got called did get called, and there was a lot of sequences where it was just like it made no sense how some penalties were getting not called and some were. And I say on both sides it was absolutely bonkers. It made no sense of just the reffing in this game was atrociously bad on both sides. I'm gonna give credit to that. But overall, I mean, the fact that the Hurricanes went into this game, you already didn't have Shane Gostisbehere. You already didn't have Jacob Slavin. Then you see Keandre Miller go out for warm-ups, comes out, and then doesn't play in the game. Then you see, recent call-up Joel Nystrom get thrown into a game in his NHL debut that I don't think anyone was ready for because you thought he was going to be a 7th defenseman. So somehow Miller is out with a lower body injury. Like I said, we'll talk about a little bit more in segment 2 what the Hurricanes need to do. But then during the game, you lose William Carrier and Eric Robinson on top of that. So you're down to 10 forwards and 6 defensemen. And you basically have all 5 out of the 6 guys you have, and I tweeted this out during the game, or even before it, you had outside of Sean Walker, 5 of those guys on that blue line played 11 games or fewer with the Hurricanes. Overall, like you're talking Nystrom with the debut, Legault in his second game. Riley's played less than 6. Nikishin has played 11 total, including the playoffs last year. This is I mean, well, I'd say, sorry, you had Chatfield in there too. So you had a good number of guys. So basically 4 out of those guys were in. But regardless, like that was just an insane stat to think of for the fact that you had out of the 6 guys, 4 of them played 11 games or less. Like that was nuts. But like I said, you lose 2 other forwards in this game. Your roster is pretty much depleted. And the crazy part was the Hurricanes are up 4-1. You get Seth Jarvis scoring goal. 7 goals in 7 games for him. He keeps his point streak alive. Sebastian Aho keeps his point streak alive. He gets a goal too. Eric Robinson scores the first one. And you even get Logan Stankoven, second, third, fourth chances, put the puck in the net himself. And then, unfortunately, the Avs kind of crawl back through the second and third period, of course. It had to be Marty Nietzsche's getting the game back within 1. Valier Nichushkin, scores 2, 1 on the power play, after just a slew of missed penalties on both sides. And there was one where it's like you could have called holding on both guys, but it is what it is. And then you see, you go to overtime, both teams had a power play, no one could score. And then this thing ends in a shootout where, lo and behold, Seth Jarvis was the lone goal scorer in the shootout. But hey, it doesn't matter. They only ask how many you put in. Hurricanes put in 1. Frederik Andersen stopped 3. And the fact, too, give props to Freddie, 44 out of 48 saves. That was the most in a single game in his career. So big props to Freddie. Still finished with a .917 save percentage, which is really impressive. But like I said, both power plays were absolutely stinks. They both stunk. Like I said, Hurricanes went 0 for 5. The Avalanche went 1 for 8. So the Hurricanes PK guys went 7 for 8 in that game. And that's after having multiple penalties called back to back to back to back. But it is what it is. Like I said, honestly, though, at least the jerseys were amazing. It's cool. You had the White Whalers jerseys. You had the light blue, fleur-de-lis, Nordiques jerseys. Those were really fun. And the vibes were definitely high on barn burner hockey, where goaltending was kind of where was it at, and then it was just whistles left, right, and center. But the fact that the Hurricanes came out of this game with a win, got the second point, like you kind of felt like, okay, you lost Robinson, you lost Carey in the middle of the game, you lost Keandre Miller, so you don't really have a lot of guys in your lineup that have significant time, playing within the system at least. And then it's, you're up, Avalanche storm back, and you go to overtime. Like, hey, at least you got a point out of a game that was basically a gong show from the start. But then, like I said, you get Seth Jarvis in the shootout, you got the win. That's what really matters. Now you get back in the win column on a very huge night where people would be like, yeah, this is the depleted Hurricanes roster. They were a lot short of a lot of guys, but in the end, they got the win. That's like you really asked for. Like I said, Frederik Andersen played out of his mind to keep this game to where it was, and then being able to win in the shootout because it's Seth Jarvis, of course. Your stars are being stars. You got the depth scoring that you needed. Like I said, with Robinson, you got Stankoven scoring too. And even some guys that are getting assists. You're talking about, Mike Riley gets an assist. Jasper Kotkaniemi, Taylor Hall, Jackson Blake. Those guys are getting assists. Nick Ehlers got his second point as the Carolina Hurricanes. He's on a 2-game point streak right now. Like I said, you got Robinson scoring, Stankoven scoring, Aho. Jarvis was the only guy who was a multi-point player that night. And the thing is, he also led the team in 5 shots, and he didn't even have in terms of all the forwards, he had the most minutes, was 23:01. Next best was Sebastian Aho at 25:35. We look at the defense. I mean, you had Sean Walker play 28 minutes, Jalen Chatfield 23:05, Mike Riley 23:12. Those guys were worked. You're talking over 30 shifts for those 3 guys alone. Absolutely bonkers type stuff because you had to do that. You had to rely on, a lot of your guys on the defense. Like you said, you're more veterans, Riley, Chatfield, and Walker. You look at, Joel Nystrom, 16:02. He was the power play 1 quarterback at one point because he had to be, because you were down all your other guys at that point. So he played a good minutes. Like Nikisha played 14:42 and Legault played 13:11. That shows you how much the faith they had in Nystrom to play 16 minutes. But the thing too is Nikisha was a +3 in this game. So you definitely appreciate that. So all in all, it tells you how deep this team has to dig to go to their depth. And luckily, with the fact of what Chicago does in their system matches the Hurricanes, you can have guys come up Legault and Nystrom to make their debuts within a couple of days of each other and still perform pretty well, things considered. I know Nystrom finished with a -2, but in a game like this, hey, what can you do? You got the win, but like I said, this was just a very chaotic game. Like you said, Marty Nietzsche gets a goal. They're celebrating Brent Burns' 1,500 games with the Hurricanes in town as well. You had the really nice jerseys, best jersey matchup all season. And the thing is, you came out with the win. You're 6-1-0 at on the season. You're 4-1-0 in the road trip, and you have a chance to go 5-1 on Saturday against Dallas. With where the roster is, it'll be very interesting for sure. So honestly, let's talk about the depleted roster for the Hurricanes or where they're at right now. So stick around. We'll do that here in a second on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Let's be real. Making excuses don't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress. I'm tired. Or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support. And that's where Rougit comes in. Rougit.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatment for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the moments that matter. So visit rugiet.com/lockedonNHL to get 50% off your first order. That's rugiet.com/lockedonNHL. And don't forget to use our code LOCKEDONNHL so they know we sent you. Rougit. Stop making excuses and start making moves. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real. Getting tickets can be a total headache between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. Their zone deals are a game changer. You pick the section, Game Time picks your seats, and you save big. How big? Well, you can find NHL tickets for under $25, so why not take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time? Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So we kind of talked about a little bit in segment 1 of the fact that this Hurricanes roster is depleting by the day on this road trip because you lose Jacob Slavin before the road trip. Of course, he is on IR retroactive to the 21st, but he can be activated at any time, so it's not really a big deal. It's just roster flexibility, as the Hurricanes PR put it. And then you lose Shane Gostisbehere in the LA Kings game, and then they send him back to Raleigh. So at that time, okay, you get your 6 defensemen. You go to Vegas, not really great. No one gets hurt, but you kind of need an extra guy. So before the game on Thursday, they call up Joel Nystrom from the Chicago Wolves. Been pretty decent so far in the first few games of the season, so it made sense to bring him up just in case. And good thing they did, because somehow Keandre Miller had a lower body injury. We're not sure what happened or how long it is. It's TBD right now. But he was in the pregame skate, and then all of a sudden you see Nystrom, and you're like, okay, well, there's another defenseman gone. There's your 3 of your top 6 guys you really need to rely on, all out with lower body injuries. And then throughout the game, like I said, you lose William Carey to lower body, and you also lose Eric Robinson to another, to another lower body injury or upper body. It's an injury that happened. It's just crazy where they're at now. So you finish with 10 forwards and 6 defensemen. And after the game, Rod Bremore said that they probably could be without Robinson and Carey for a good bit. What's a good bit? Who really knows? But if it's enough to where you're going to have to do call-ups for your wingers, that's going to make things very interesting, because who do you really look at? Obviously, top choice is going to have to be Bradley Nadeau. It's just, okay, where are you going to put him in this lineup? Because you're talking about you're talking about a third line and a fourth line guy. Unless you feel like that you could move Taylor Hall down and you might move a Bradley Nadeau to the top 6, but that's a big jump for a guy. He did score a Michigan goal, which was absolutely amazing for the Wolves. But that's a huge jump going from top line Chicago to top 6 Hurricanes going into Dallas. If they go that direction, I mean, I wouldn't be upset if they did, but, do you stick them in the third line? Do you kind of just ease them into the fourth line and, you let them take Robinson's spot? Then, okay, then who are you throwing on the carry spot? Are you talking Svechnikov? And then if that's the case, who do you kind of put in that spot too? Because like I said, you're down two forwards now, and they're both bottom 6 wingers. So at that point, it's like, okay, well, where do you go from here in terms of your call-ups? Because it wouldn't make sense to call like a Ryan Suzuki or one of your centers. That just doesn't make any sense, because that's the thing. You are looking at a possibility of, are you looking at maybe do you bring Giovanni Smith up and have him as an extra winger? Because he does bring some grit to the team if you think he's probably ready more than the other guys. Because, do you look at, I don't think Lepchexov's ready to come up. I don't know if, is Felix Swarm done enough? I'm not really sure. Is Juha Jaska healthy, ready to go? Do you bring up Jaska back? Because what the Hurricanes get out of him. So if you're thinking about bringing up Bradley Nadeau, then it's probably, I think it's either going to be Smith or, Juha Jaska that could be the replacements for a carry that you can put on the third or fourth line, depending on what line you want to put Nadeau on, if you bring Nadeau up. But I think if you're looking at 2 guys to bring up, I think Nadeau has to be one of them. It just makes sense. He's doing really good in Chicago. And I just don't think, unless you, like I said, unless you bring up Jaska again or you bring up Giovanni Smith, that might help a little bit. But if you're talking about a Hurricanes team that needs to score too, just outside of Aho and Jarvis, I think Nadeau will be the way to go for it. It's just the Hurricanes are in a bad spot right now because you're talking about one game against Dallas before you're home, and then you get a couple days off. But at that point, if Robinson and Carey out are for a good bit, then it's like, okay, what's the smart move here? Like I said, you could, call up Smith or Jaska. I think Jaska would probably be a better option because what you get out of him. You put him on that fourth line with probably Svech and KK, and then you move Taylor Hall to the third line, put him with the Jordans, and then if you call up Bradley Nadeau, put him in the top 6. Because I think if you're bringing up Bradley Nadeau, you have to put him in a spot where he's going to be with guys who can score goals. I know it's going to be a very small line with, Blake, Stankoven, and Nadeau, but I don't really know any other options you can think of unless you want to bring a center like Suzuki up, and then you're putting Stankoven back on the wing. Then it's Blake, Stankoven, Suzuki, or whoever in that position for the center. You move KK to the second line, and then it's Blake, KK, Stankoven, and then it's whoever you bring on the fourth line. That's the thing where the Hurricanes are at right now. Is just if you call a couple guys up, who is and where are you placing them? Or you just, are you putting Jankowski back into the lineup as your fourth line center? Then you're kind of just looking at wingers at that point. So the Hurricanes are in an interesting spot. And if Miller's not ready for the Dallas game, then you're down to, you're looking at pairings that should have been Miller Walker, but then you're looking at Riley Walker as your top pair, then you're looking at Nikishin, Chatfield as your second, and then Nystrom Legault. They kind of held their own against Colorado, but I'm curious to see how they're going to do against Dallas in the last game, where now you're really short on your defense to where you have 2 guys that have played long enough to be the veterans. But then you got a lot of guys who've not played with the Hurricanes very long, so that's another big thing. That's another thing you got to figure out. And now your forward core is depleted by a couple of guys, especially in your bottom 6. So now you got to figure who you're going to bring up. So this will be very interesting for the Hurricanes, not just for the Dallas game, but kind of moving forward when they come back home and play the Vegas Golden Knights on Tuesday. Because now, you're out. If Miller's not ready to go, then you're possibly out 3 of your top 6 defensemen. You're out of your 2 wingers on your third and your fourth line that you're kind of have to figure, okay, who are we going to bring up? So now it's like you're having so many Wolves guys on the roster in game 7 of the season. That's the crazy part where the Hurricanes are at right now. So it'll be very interesting. But it stinks to the fact that you already had 2 defensemen out going into this game. You have Miller out for whatever reason. And of course, we're not going to know for sure because there's no practice on Friday. They're going to have a morning skate on Saturday. So you don't know what's going on with Miller. So if he's out, there's your 3 guys. And then you just lost 2 forwards who have them playing really well. So the Hurricanes are a very interesting spot. I'm kind of curious to see what happens from there. But either way, they won on Thursday night. You love to see it, back in the win column. Like I said, 6-1 on the season, 4-1 on the road trip. And now you go to Dallas on Saturday and kind of knock that last game out. But before we do that, though, media did talk to Seth Jarvis after the game. So let's listen in and react to his thoughts, react to what he said here in a second on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something right on the action, whether if it's your actual team or your fantasy team, and whether if you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So, what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So we talked about the game, getting some instant reactions from that craziness that was that one, but at least they won. Also talking about the roster now being depleted going into Dallas, because now you've had a bunch of guys out that you didn't really think you were going to have out. But media did meet with Seth Jarvis and Rod Brindamore and them, but we are going to listen to what Seth Jarvis had to say. So without further ado, let's jump into that press conference and get Jarvis' thoughts after the win right now.
Honestly, just unbelievable to see the work ethic of this group despite the injuries, despite going down 2 forwards. What was the most impressive part up from your end?
I mean, we really leaned on our depth. I think when you have guys like Mikey Riley as your 17th man to come in here and play as well as he has, Nyes, who came in 15 minutes before puck drop and played well, I think you have guys all around that really stepped up tonight. And I mean, 2 points is 2 points. It was a little ugly, but I think all the credit to the guys that stepped up and the penalty kill. I mean, killing off that many penalties was huge.
I was going to say, when you think about the PK overall this season, it's been so successful. In a game like this, what stood out, if no matter who it was almost the next man up mentality? Yeah,
we had guys go down, guys that kill penalties, and we had KK, guys like that to step up and fill in and do a really good job was absolutely massive, because air's thin up here. It's tough to breathe sometimes, and to take the load off of Jordan, Marty, me, Fishy, and to be able to go in there and kill penalties like that was awesome.
How much confidence do you get from a win like this? It's early in the season, but, I mean, against the Avalanche, 2 good teams going at it.
Yeah, they're a great team over there. You definitely do. I think especially in the first period, I thought we played really well. After that, it wasn't great, but like I said before, 2 points is 2 points. Doesn't matter how you get them, and to do against a team like that on the road is massive.
What can you tell me about the shootout? That process on that shot.
Roddy's given me a lot of flack over the years. I haven't been great, and I've tried some different moves, and I found a few that work. So just stick with my guns, staying confident, and it worked out for me.
Big thing to the Carolina Hurricanes and Seth Jarvis is always for that. And you kind of heard it from him, too. It's just like I talked about, it's the depth that really helped out. You're talking about Nystrom that comes in 15 minutes before puck drop. Hey, congratulations. Here's your debut. You look at Jesperi Kotkaniemi playing some PK minutes to give some relief to the main stalwarts that have to go on the PK. And you're doing this without Jacob Slavin, so that's very huge for them, too. And the shout out to Mike Riley. He's come in here 7th defenseman, and then all of a sudden he's just playing a bunch of games because of all these injuries, but he's been playing very, very well, and that's why the Hurricanes got him. And the fact that it's 1 year, $1.1 million, that is a steal for a 7th defenseman who's had to come in and had to play top pairing with Sean Walker the 6th game into the season because you're so short on your defenseman. It's a big, big stuff there. And, even Legault, got 2 kind of iffy penalties, but overall, he did pretty well, things considered, too. So, yeah, it's just the next up. It's the man-up mentality, the fact that you lose 2 forwards. You're depleted on your defenseman. You're having to rely on Nystrom to be power play 1 quarterback because Sean Walker's in the box, and you're kind of have to figure everything out from there, too. So, it's just it's the mentality of this team where there's no quit, and it's just next man up. It's like, all right, go figure it out and see what you can do. But that's kind of where you're at now with the Carolina Hurricanes. It's good to see the fact that they dug deep and got the win, especially against a good Colorado Avalanche team who are still technically right now unbeaten in regulation. They're 5-0-3 now. They've lost in overtime against Utah earlier this week, and then they just lost in a show to the Hurricanes. But when you look at where the Hurricanes are at, this is a tough team that's very resilient in the fact that they still do what they do. And it's funny, talking about Seth Jarvis about the shootout goal for the fact that he's still trying to get better at it, but he's gotten pretty good as of late. And hey, it's the one that got in and it counts. And Jarvis said it best. Hey, 2 points is 2 points, and it doesn't matter if it's good or if it's ugly, it still counts either way. And it's interesting too when you look at the first period. I mean, you're up 4-1, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. So you're kind of like, okay, this game is, you're doing pretty well, all things considered. And then all of a sudden, the last two periods, you let them back in it. But I would say even then too, it's like, man, just like I said, the Hurricanes were on the PK so much that you didn't really get a good 5-on-5 game for the most part. It just seemed like everything was just being called on. It was very lopsided. Like I said, at one point it was 7-2 in penalties, but it did end up 8-5. But even then, like, it was just crazy at one point where it was just, I think it took like 4 or 5 power plays for the Avalanche for the Hurricanes just to get their first. Like, that's how long it took. It was like partway in through the second period, they got their first power play. Like, that's just, it was like I said, you can't blame the ugly win on the Hurricanes because officiating was bad on both sides. Let's be honest, but I don't think that you can't really lean on that too much. But it's just one of those things where this game was just a straight up gong show. You could tell, like with the jerseys and the fact it was a barn burner game, and the fact that there's so many penalties too. It was just absolute madness. But the Hurricanes, held on and they got the win. And like Jarvis said, it's. They played great in the first period, not so great in the last two, but it was an ugly win, but it still counts on the board, and they got the job done. And that's with them having to come with a man-up mentality, and that's kind of where you're at right now for the Carolina Hurricanes. So you are feeling pretty good about yourself. Like I said, you're 6-1 on the season. You're 4-1 on the road trip. Now you got to play Dallas in the last game before you come back home against Vegas, and you got the Islanders the night before, Halloween, and then you got the Boston Bruins. Then you got the Boston Bruins to start the November run of games on that Saturday. So it's very interesting to see where the Hurricanes are at. Coming on Saturday against the Stars, and you're back home against Vegas for the first time in over 2 weeks. So it should be really interesting from there. But the thing is the Hurricanes won. That's all that really matters, and that's what really needs the help right now. But so we are going to do final thoughts. I don't do final thoughts a whole lot, but I think this is something we definitely got to talk about. Seth Jarvis, 7 goals, leads the team. You love to see it. 11 points, also really great too. Sebastian Aho leads the team with the 6 assists. He does have 9 points. Those guys combined are +5. Jarvis with 3, Sebastian Aho with 2. But how about the fact that Seth Jarvis now has a power play goal, a shorthanded goal, which he had 5 last year, and then 4 game winners, and then 2 overtimes in 7 games. So very good by Seth Jarvis. Sebastian Aho, like I said, 3 goals, 9 points. Taylor Hall, 2 goals, 5 points. Jackson Blake, 1 goal and 5 points as well. So you'd love to see that from a lot of those guys. I will say this, though. Outside of 22 players that have played for the Hurricanes, 5 of them don't have a point. And you got Nystrom, who just made his debut. Jankowski, who's played only 2 games. Slavin hasn't played since October 11th. And Legault just played 2 games, and like I said, those were this week. Andrei Svechnikov right now, 7 games, -3. And just in this Colorado game alone, he played like 16. He played over 16, like close to 16 minutes. 2 shots on goal, 1 hit. I don't know what's really going on with Svech, but it's gotten to the point where the Hurricanes are like, just go serve a penalty. Like, that's where you're at right now. Like, it's like, it doesn't even, like, if it's like, all right, we need someone to serve this penalty, Svech, you go take care of it. Like I said, he's demoted to the 4th line. He's on the 2nd power play unit. But it's like he's averaging 2 shots a game at this point. You're talking 14 shots in 7 games. And like, you saw him in the shootout. He missed the goal by a good bit on the shootout attempt against Trent Miner. I think it's a big confidence thing that's going on with him right now, but you got to hope at some point it gets figured out because you cannot rely on playoff fetch. You can't wait for 82 games to be like, all right, we got to the playoffs. Here's Andrei Svechnikov. You can't do that. You need to get him rolling. And I'm sorry, right now, 7 games, 0 points. The other guys you got 5 other guys who. You have 4 other guys right now who have no points, but they've all played 2 or fewer games, and Svech has played 7. Like, Mike Riley's played 5 games, already has 3 assists, and he's a +4. And he's your 7th defenseman. Like I said, I'm not trying to be negative or, be too hard on Svech, but it's like at some point, it's like, you gotta get rolling. You guys gotta get something in. Like I said, I know it's a confidence thing. It's probably has to be a confidence thing. I'm not sure, but it's just at some point, something's got to click. And hopefully it's soon because you're going to need them. Like this roster's getting depleted, and you cannot rely on Jarvis and Aho to do everything. I mean, they're doing a great job of it. Of course, you're getting help from like Hall, Staycoven, Blake, the defense. But at some point, you got to get Svechnikov rolling too. And it's just this is the long stretch where it's like something's got to give, and hopefully something does. But we'll see how it goes. The Hurricanes got Dallas on Saturday, but right now, like I said, you got to be feeling pretty good of where you're at, especially after a crazy game like that against Colorado, which was a measuring stick game with not even a full roster. Imagine 7 games of this with a healthy Hurricanes roster. It would be absolute cinema for 7 games between these two teams. But you know what? A win's a win. Off day Friday, then it's back at it for the last game of the road trip on Saturday. It'd be very interesting to see how that goes. But enjoy your victory Friday, Keniacs, because your Carolina Hurricanes are back on the win column after winning 5-4 in a shootout on Thursday night against the Colorado Avalanche. But until we recap and talk about the game from the weekend, this would be the Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen today. For your second listen, let's check out the Locked On NHL game night. Every game, every night until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL game night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or register to your podcast. If you want to keep up with me, I'm a One True Zach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky, the Zachary Martin, where if you click the link tree in my bio, you can find all my written content at thehockeywriters.com. I've been putting out a lot of stuff recently. Game previews, Hurricanes notebooks, talk about player profiles, all that stuff. So make sure to go check that out. If you want to check out my other podcast, is the Searchcast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. If for Locked On Hurricanes, we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe. Hit the bell notifications so you don't miss a show. Hit the thumbs up to make the show as well. Share with all other Keniacs to become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Friday and enjoy your weekend. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.